Good morning, it is Friday morning, and this morning I've got some arches to put up. So last year we grew 6 different types of beans, and we've only got the 3 arches, so we were kind of mix and matching. Didn't work as well as we wanted it to. And I've been thinking, you know, a couple of weeks ago I was kind of talking about what we're going to do along the side between us and our neighbour, about putting the large posts in and the beams across the top and growing something up there like a kiwi or something. We were kind of thinking along those lines. Well, as a temporary measure, it's not going to be as long lasting, but I was pricing up putting those posts in to kind of make them stable enough to withhold a plant that was going to be there for a number of years. So like, I don't want to just put the posts up a bit haphazard and then get something really beautiful growing up there, like a really nicely well established kiwi, and then it blow down in the wind. So I was going to have to put like quite a lot of money basically into getting some really good of those, you know, fence post feet, any of that. But anyway, it was going to cost quite a lot of money, and money is not something I've got very much of, particularly at the moment. So I've come up with kind of a double solution. So it's going to mean we've got more places to grow beans up this year to keep the varieties separate, but also it's going to give us that kind of the thing that I wanted along that edge. And I've just bought some more arches. I've bought 4 of them. The ones along our path are double thickness, but these are just going to be singles and then tied together with bamboo canes. I don't really have space to do them double thickness there because they're going to be going at the ends of the beds, and I want to line them up so that they're easy to pick. One of the best things about growing beans up arches is that it makes the picking so easy. And so I want the end of each of the paths of the beds to just go straight under the arch to make that really easy. So anyway, I've got 4 arches with me today, and I'm going to put them together. The sun is shining, the sky is blue, it's magnificent. So the arches just come in these small boxes and you put them together yourself. They're incredibly simple. Because they just screw together in segments, you can make them shorter. These ones are 2.4 meters tall. That doesn't include how much you put in the ground. So they're 2.4 meters tall, just freestanding. You're going to bury at least 1 segment of legs into the ground, so they're a bit shorter than that. And then if you want to have them only like 3 foot tall to use as arches over your bed or anything like that, you can just use less segments. I'm not going to go on and wax lyrical about how wonderful I think growing beans up arches are, because I did a whole video on this last Saturday. So I won't bore you with that again, but basically I think they're a really good solution. And how we're going to arrange our beans this year is on the 3 sets of double arches, we're going to grow the Belotti beans because we want a lot of them, and the runner beans because they are really, really vigorous growers, and so I wouldn't want to put them on a single arch. I'm going to have them on a double for both quantity and stability. And we're also going to grow Greek gigantes up the double arches. The Greek gigantes are actually just a form of runner beans, so they grow really, really similar. They've just got a different kind of pod style. So that's going to be our 3 main arches going down the pathway. And then the 3 arches that I'm putting up along the edge with Ron's allotment today are going to have the 3 French beans. So I've got a purple one which is called Violetta de Triomphe, which I grow every year. I love it. I'm growing a yellow one, which is Necker Gold, which is just, you know, I think that's probably the most famous yellow French bean. And I'm also going to have a go at a green one for the first time ever, just a bog standard green French bean. That's the 3 that I'm doing, and they're going to be grown separately up the 3 arches at the side. So we will have purple, yellow and green. Lovely. So like I said, I'm going to position these arches in relation to the beds so that when you walk up these paths between the beds, you're faced straight on the centre of an arch. It's for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because I just think it's going to look much better that way if they're kind of tied into the shape of the allotment. And also that's going to make picking easier because you can just go straight up the path and you're straight underneath the canopy of the beans. That does mean that they're not going to be foot to foot. They're going to be about 40 centimetres apart. So I'm going to tie them in across the top with bamboo canes, just linking the 3 arches together. That's going to give them a little bit more stability to stop them flexing and wobbling. I'm also going to put a couple of larger posts in the back of this fence and anchor them to the back of the fence. But I'm not going to do that today because I'm going to build small 2 foot by 1 foot raised beds around the feet of these arches to plant the beans into, so I can incorporate a lot of organic matter into the top of that. So that's where the beans are going to be planted. That's going to help with the stability. Another reason that I've decided to grow the French beans up these 3 single arches is that they're less vigorous growers than, say, the runner beans. The runner beans and the Greek gigantes, they really grow enormously and you get this big kind of billowing mass of foliage, which then, if we get wind in the middle of the summer season, can really knock an arch over quite easily. So I'm hoping that because the French beans are much more polite in their growing habits, they're just a bit tamer, these 3 single arches will be able to hold up the French beans without too much problem. I'm not worried about them coming crashing down. Okay, 3 arches in and tied across the top. Not tied in the bottom at all yet because I'm going to be putting the boxes around the feet. So I will make a little raised bed like these ones, but these ones are slightly too short. So I'm going to make larger versions of these and I'm going to build them around the bases of the thing. So they'll be quite deep, about the same depth as that. And there we have it. Can't wait for bean season now. I think they'll look lovely with all the different coloured flowers across them. So those arches, I mean, it's never going to look like the Palace of Versailles, is it? They're really wibbly wobbly. But the thing is it means that we've actually gained loads more space along that way. I've got 3 different types of French beans to go in. Like I said, I've got a green one, a purple one and a yellow one this year, and that's just going to sort them out perfect. I've also got 1 more arch which is going to go on the other side of the allotment, and I'm going to grow the achota up that this year. And I think that's our arch quota filled, to be honest. I'm quite pleased with it. It's wonky. It's always going to be wonky. They're £10 arches. Once they've got plants growing up them, they're going to look absolutely fine. All I've got to do now is pick something for lunch, pick some greens for dinner and head home. But it's a beautiful day, but we're just losing the sun on this side of our allotment now. So in the morning in the winter, the sun just streams in. Our whole allotment is sunny and it just pours in the shed here. It's just bliss.
but about this time, so kind of 2ish, the sun just heads off. So I think it's probably time to go home, because although it's really warm and wonderful and I'm sort of like no coated today, I think once the sun's gone in, or at least it's not shining on our plot, it's going to get nippy pretty quick. Yeah, lunch. I'm going to go pick some lunch.
So first thing, look what I've noticed today. Those really tall broad beans that I had in are actually trying to flower.
Little feed of those.
Very nice. Okay.
These.
Yep.
That's plenty, isn't it?
Yeah, loads. Good morning guys, it is Sunday and it's been snowing like this for 2 days, but it's just not really settling. So instead of it being a wonderful winter wonderland, it's like cold and wet. And actually really, as I'm saying this, I'm facing the window at the moment, as I'm saying this, it's suddenly got loads thicker. But basically for 2 days it's just been like this, like a mixture of a bit of snow and then it turns to sleet and then it turns to rain, then it turns back to snow. It's not ideal, but anyway, that's why I'm inside and I'm going to be doing a bit of seed sowing this morning. So a couple of weeks ago I did a video just at the end of January about what can be sown in February. It wasn't an exhaustive list, but it was kind of a lot of the stuff which I'm going to be sowing. If you haven't watched that, I'll stick it above my head. And so yeah, I'm just going to have a go. There's a couple of risky ones, but most of them are pretty safe. So firstly, I'm going to be sowing into Jiffy Pellets, these little discs that are made up of compacted coir. So when you put them in water, they rehydrate, they expand, and then you can sow your seeds directly into these. I used to use them years ago. You used to get them free in, like, if you bought seeds, you used to get like a couple of these kind of in the bottom of the seed packet. We're talking about 15 years ago. Can't remember where I was buying them from, but anyway, you used to. And so I used them then. But about a month ago, Jenny, somebody on here, sent me a couple of these to try out. And I remembered how brilliant they are. So I've bought a load more. I recommend them. There's a link underneath. I haven't had any problems with them yet, other than I lost a couple of aubergines that I sowed. But I think that was due to cold rather than anything problematic with the way they were growing, because I've said before, they're in my bedroom. We'll do a bit of a tour of what all the seeds are doing when I finish sowing these, but they're by my bedroom window and the lid wasn't on properly, and basically a gale blows through those windows even when they're totally shut, because they're a bit ropey. So yeah, I think it got caught in the draft, so I lost a couple of them, but other than that, everything's growing really, really well. Yeah, so let's rehydrate some of these Jiffy Pellets to get started. I've got 2 sizes of them here. I'm just throwing them into this tray and I'm just going to pour some water over. That's all you need to do. Interestingly, the larger ones rehydrate way faster than the smaller ones, but you'll see that happening. So the first thing I'm sowing is Cavolo. I think I said last week that we didn't sow enough of it last year, and this isn't going to be my only sowing of this. I'll start now and I will sow probably every 2 months up until the summer. I love Cavolo. We eat loads of it, and this year we only had, this year I grew them in 2 batches rather than the normal sort of 4 or 5 that I do throughout the year. So I grew one, I missed the really early sowing, which is this one I'm doing now. And I did one about late March and one again in June, and it just wasn't enough. So it didn't work out that well. So I'm going back to the sowing every couple of months starting February. So that's my first one to go in today. Also brassicas, I'm going to be sowing some Brussels sprouts. I've got 2 varieties. I've got Bedford fill basket, which is a pretty standard job. I'm going to be doing that again. That's the ones we grew last year. But I'm also going to try again with Crispus, which is a supposedly clubroot resistant variety. Last year I sowed about 6 of these and not a single one of them germinated. So I've got my fingers crossed that it's going to be a bit better this time round. Clubroot resistant, also germination resistant, but I'm going to give it another go. It's all very weather dependent. So whereas with the Cavolo, I'm going to just keep sowing that repeatedly. The Brussels sprouts I'll probably sow in 2 waves because it depends what our spring and early summer's like as to whether they're going to do any good. So I'll do 1 set now and I'll do 1 set about mid-March. So I won't sow masses of them. I'm not going to be sowing like a whole field of Brussels sprouts. I'm going to sow about 6 and then 6 again later in the spring. Also, a much more standard February sowing, I'm going to throw in some all year round cauliflower. I don't have a particularly successful track record with cauliflower. It never really works out for me. This year we've done brilliantly with the Romanesco cauliflower broccoli type thing. That's been really good, so I'm going to be sowing them again this year, but it's a bit too early for them, or it's too early for me for them. But I am putting in a couple of these. We live in hope. Every year we live in hope. Another thing that this isn't going to be the only sowing of is kohlrabi. I'm doing 2 varieties this year, which are Azure, which is the ones I grew last year, which are from MERYL seeds. Wonderful, wonderful variety. Had a huge amount of success with them last year. The only thing I didn't do was plant enough in the succession. So I started some off this time last year and then got them into the ground. It would have been about early April. But then, as is often the case, it was only when we started harvesting them and I was like, God, these are amazing, I better sow some more. But by that stage, it's quite late to be sowing more. And then the second set we did get a bit of a harvest out of, but the third set not so much because I was too late. So this year I'm going to be doing February and then probably early April. And I will keep sowing these successionally because they are wonderful and just a really great vegetable. There's also Dutchman spring cabbage. I normally grow greyhound spring cabbage, but I'm going to have a go with these this year. I'll probably throw in some greyhound as well, but I'm starting off with Dutchman. Not doing very many. When you're doing these really early sowings,
that are going to be successional, so I'm not sowing all of my spring cabbages that I'm going to have for the year. I'm only going to be sowing about 4 or 5 of them, with the expectation that a couple maybe won't make it, and then I'll have sort of 3 or 4 in the bed for this wave, and then I'll just sow more. Otherwise we get into the situation where we're just eating cabbage for a period of about 6 weeks, and nobody needs that. Also, we are on the celeriac game. This is like classic time to sow it. This isn't stretching at all. So I'm going to get a load of them in. They take a long time in the ground, so I won't be successional sowing these. I'm just going to start them off now, all the ones that I'm going to want for the year. We've still got last year's in the ground now, so they are in there for a long time, and there is quite an overlap. So I'm just going to sow quite a few of these and get them started now. I've got 3 varieties of parsley I'm growing this year. I've got Lisette and Champion, which are both curly ones, and then I've got just the Italian plain leaf, you know, the giant parsley. So I'm just going to sow a few of those. This is probably the only sowing of the parsley that I'll start indoors, so I'll get these ones going, and then by the time we're halfway through March, which is when I'd be sowing the next lot, I'll just be direct sowing them into the ground because it will be warm enough then. Right, as well as vegetables, I'm also going to be sowing some flowers. So sunflowers, I've got 3 varieties of sunflowers I'm growing: Giant Russian, Claret, and some saved seed from last year. So I'm just going to get them in. It's not too early. I like to grow my sunflowers on really strong before I put them out, because it lessens the slug disasters, which is something that I come across a lot with putting sunflowers out. So I just grow them on. I get them really big before I put them out. So now is always the time that I sow my sunflowers. Slightly more dodgy start. I'm going to be starting some cosmos today. I've got 3 varieties of cosmos: lemonade, apricot lemonade, and one that I can't say the name of. Could be Senia. Starting all 3 of those off. It is early. Normally I'd start them about mid-March, but last year I accidentally started them too early. I just got myself right in a kerfuffle, and they were fantastic. I know we had slightly odd weather last year in the sense that it was really hot early on and then tailed off in the summer. Well, some of the cosmos that I sowed later on, kind of a more traditional time, took them a very long time to get to flower because we had that really damp summer, whereas the ones that I'd sown early were looking fantastic for that whole time because they'd had that really early growth boost in our hot spring. So obviously I don't know what the weather's going to do this year, but it's worth a try again. So I'm going to do some now and then I'll sow some later, so I'm kind of covering both bases. And that's about it. That's not all I'm going to be sowing for February. I'm going to be kind of spacing it out. I've got quite a lot of flowers to go in actually, particularly marigolds. It's basically the very beginning of starting this kind of rolling sowing. Right, so I better get on with it. So there we go. We have got a whole load of things sewn up today, which is really good. So I feel like we're really off to a start now. I'm going to put them downstairs, just in the warm, in the sitting room. There's a bit of light, but it's not really light down there. They're not really going to need it until they start germinating, most of them. So I'm just going to keep them on the dining room table until they come up. And let's go and have a look at what has already come up, because there's quite a lot going actually. We've got the chillies and some peppers up here. They're all starting to get their first set of true leaves, so they're going well. Some of them are growing really quickly. These guys are off. Look at them. A couple of them are a bit bedraggled, but they're looking pretty strong. Looking pretty strong, and they're not anywhere near as leggy as they were last year. This window's definitely a better spot for them. But look at these, the black jalapenos. I love how even when they're this young, you can see like the difference in leaf colour from the black chaps. Look at that. Just starting to go purple. Gorgeous. Gorgeous. And then under here we've got aubergines and a second sowing of chillies. So these actually haven't been in very long, but I lost a couple of these due to the cold weather. But the rest of them are coming along fine. I've got those spikes in there because I've got a little key of like what purple means, what orange means, to keep them all separate. But yeah, quite pleased with them. Next to these guys, I've got the potatoes are still chitting away quite happily. They've got a bit of time to go. Although these ones, for some reason, have just really taken off. Bought these from a different place, and they seem to be way ahead. But yeah, so this is chilies, peppers, aubergines, all looking pretty strong. Pretty happy. So, Ivy? A meow. Meow. Dingo Pringo. So let's just go out to the conservatory where I've got the spring onions and the leeks. So these guys, they're coming up looking fab. They don't mind the cold, these guys. It's pretty chilly out here. And I've got spring onions down here, white Lisbon, Pompeii and Performer. Performer, ironically, is the least performing of them. And they're all under here, under the lemon tree, which seems to survive the cold no problem. We've got loads of flowers coming, and just up here, see a lemon? Ooh, we've got quite a few on here actually. Exciting? Exciting. But boy, is it cold out there. Starting to settle a bit actually, isn't it? Well guys, it's absolutely freezing, hence I've got a big blanket on, and I'm going to go down and sit next to the fire I think for the rest of the evening because it is cold and it's meant to be really cold tonight. So yeah, I'm going to get prepped in front of the fire. I don't have a glass of wine to cheers you with. Sadly, I don't have any wine in the house, which is a massive error of judgment on my half, but you know, these things happen and I'm not going out to get any, so yeah. It's just going to be a cup of tea tonight, but it's freezing. I hope you're all warm wherever you are because this is silly. The last couple of years, you know, we only had frost once last year. Once we had one frosty day and it wasn't even that frosty. And this year it's just been so cold in comparison. But the snow is starting to settle a bit now, so maybe tomorrow morning it will be lovely and snowy, I don't know. But yeah, I'm going to have to venture to the supermarket tomorrow, which is a bit alarming. Yeah, anyway guys, I'm going to go down and sit by the fire. Right, that was the gimbal running out of battery, so I reckon that's a hint for me to go. If you enjoyed it, give me the thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed already, think about subscribing. I'll see you next week, guys.